Welcome everyone to another edition of Spoiler Warning featuring myself, Tom Colohue. We are live on YouTube and on Twitch to discuss the latest and most breaking news you can find in pro wrestling, including exclusive news you cannot find anywhere else. So our headlines today start out with Kairi Sane, not only her return but where she's headed, who she's pairing up with and what that may well mean for her former friends and now enemies. We have talk of Julia coming over to WWE. This is primarily from both Mike Johnson of PWInsider, but also heavily disputed by Dave Meltzer. We'll be talking that battle. Wargames has been officially announced as first reported here on the Tom Colohue channel in Spoiler Warning, so those of you who are regulars here will already be fully aware that this one was coming. The Ric Flair video that I've released, I want to talk a little bit about that. Note that this is not news on Ric Flair, this is news on my Ric Flair video. So anyone who is sick of hearing about Ric Flair, now's the time. Solo and Cena, how we got to that match, how we got to that finish, and who's responsible for it. Randy Orton is expected at this week's Monday Night Raw. Now, I've put in the thumbnail that he may well be joining the Alpha Academy. That's where I see him most likely going. What I will say is that I don't know if he's expected on TV, but I know he's expected at Raw tonight. So he's going to be there. Logan Paul is now the United States champion. Once again once again reported first here on the Tom Colohue channel. We'll be diving into what the next steps are for that. We also have a little bit more as regards wrestling media. Firstly, a little detail on BWE and the problems that they're having right now, particularly the completely false CM Punk report. And then a little bit on Reddit user Kermit125 resurfacing after saying that the WWE had been sold to Saudi Arabia and yet somehow still being trusted. LA Knight and his future with the company is on talks. We're also talking WTF Wrestling, which will be the new title going forwards for Sunday shows, as you will find our regular Sunday video slot. Finally, Sarray, formerly of NXT, has signed outside of WWE after numerous reports that the WWE were making a play. Simply not the case. We'll be breaking into a lot more details as to how we got where we are with that. So as we start out, please do remember, there are currently 48 people watching on YouTube and only the 18 likes. 2 more gets us to 20. Our record is 33 by 5 pass. So in the next 3 minutes, if we can get 15 out of 52, 15 out of 52, we will break that record. Let's catch up with the chat and then we'll get to our first piece of news nice and quick. Hello Khalid. 23 Fresh is asking about Will Ospreay. I've already talked that to death on Friday. Spoiler warning, by all means check that out. KJ says, clickbait, you're trolling bad dirt sheets such as BWE. I'll get more onto that. Posted an apology and no future updates. I'll send it to you later if you want. Please do. Razar says, hey Tom, how you doing? Doing well, thank you Razar, appreciate you. James says, hey Tom, I know you don't watch the Saudi shows, but that was the worst crowd to bring Kairi back. The crowd was so disinterested in the majority of the show. It was so sad to see. Yeah, that's not a surprise for me, unfortunately. Omega is here shouting, Tom Colohue. We have just hit 33 likes. 33, one more gets us over the line. We're going to talk about that one. Spider-Boss. Bayley says, hello, Tom. Hello, Bayley. Spider-Boss says, do you think WWE could try to sign Mercedes money? I mentioned this because Mercedes hasn't signed with other companies yet. Again, we dive deeply into that on Friday. Let me just catch up where we are. Spider-Boss says, do you think Bayley could make a babyface turn? More on that very shortly. That's our first piece of news. Also says, Solo dominated John Cena. I think Solo's the right guy to beat Roman at WrestleMania 40. 23 is now asking about MGF. You just want to know where everyone's going. They don't know where they're going. How can I know where they're going? Backwards says, hey Tom, how you doing this fine Monday? Love how upset the IWC is that Logan Paul won the US title. We talked about it ad nauseum here. That was always going to be the plan and always the intention going forwards. 23 Fresh says, is Logan Paul respected backstage? Yes, he is. Very well respected, in fact. And Khalid says, yes, Randy Orton, I really miss him. Can't wait when he shows on TV. KJ says, I wonder how long before someone says Randy Orton is backstage at Raw tonight. I've seen nothing so far. As I say, I'm being very, very clear. He's expected at Raw. I'm not aware of plans to get him on TV as of yet. Michael says, hi, Tom. Hello, Michael. We'll have more on Randy Orton shortly, by the way. Robin Dave says, Randy Orton has been missed by everyone. Maybe we might see an RKO out of nowhere. Maybe. Mustafa said, did my like duty. Thank you very much, Mustafa. We're now on 34 likes. Thank you very kindly. It does guarantee growth of the channel and more people joining the chat. Thank you also very much, Pete Leeds, Pete, for renewing your subscription on Twitch. Says, back again, once again, in the club. You can find me in the club and you can find you in the club. KJ says, Kermit from Reddit is back. Yes, he is. Ed says, I'm just here for clickbaiting and mod duties. Makes it sound like, Ed, you don't enjoy it here. We try and put on a great show, mate. What are you worried about? Dad says, big up, Tom. Any idea who's next for Seth? At this point, no, but he's not going to be Drew McIntyre, is it? 23 says, do the wrestlers backstage get upset about Roman Reigns taking so many breaks? Nope, they're in many ways incredibly jealous of the fact that he gets to set his own schedule. KJ says the crowd was cheering. It was one match where they were quiet. Also, Kairi looked much different than the last time. Once the camera showed her face, they popped. I would not be able to tell you the answer to that. Razar backs up that it wasn't good. Kind of surprised because the card looked decent on paper, but the crowd stunk it up. I'm going to be clear, I don't believe any Saudi show has had a particularly good crowd. I remember the very first show, the only one I actually watched, a lot of them seemed to be having a whole conversation in the front row. Nobody was actually watching the wrestling. Spider-Boss says, I get WWE want to make Rhea Ripley look dominant, but she's beaten half of the Raw Women's division. Her matches haven't been that good. And Michael says, the guy from the screenshot I sent the other day, thank you, is saying that Mercedes is dodging AEW. So what you're saying is, in many ways, he's mentioning what I've said about Mercedes having second thoughts, but he's mentioning it in a different way. I can back up that she's having second thoughts because I've already reported that. Dodging, not so much. KJ says, Tom, do you think it's a possibility Triple H is bringing in all these female talent to help persuade Mercedes to come back? Nope. Not at all. They're in constant conversation with Mercedes money. Bringing in other wrestlers is going to do nothing for her. It's completely unrelated. Richard says, hello, Tom. Any news on AJ Styles' return and what his plans are going forwards? Not at this point in time. I'm waiting on a little bit more information, but I've got nothing at the moment, to be honest with you. He has completely vanished, and it's hard to say why. Yes, Khalid, I'm excited for Wargames. Thank you, Daz, for hitting the like button. We have 37 now. 3 more gets us to 40. Noob says, hello, Tom. How are you doing today? I'm here for some news. Good to know, because news is what you're going to get. Hello, Sean, and hello, Blue. Says, hi, Tom. I was right about Kairi, just 1 PLE early. Richard says, hello, Tom. Any news on if Roman is truly leaving the rest of the year? We'll find out very shortly. The rest of the year is a very, 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 very big stretch of time. Backward says, I definitely agree the crowd sucked during the Crown Jewel show. Mez says, Tom, a question. If Liv comes back at the Rumble and wins it and challenges Rhea, who in your opinion should win the Elimination Chamber for the Women's Championship? Okay, so here's the issue that you've got. You've asked me, if this happens, and this happens, and this happens, what do you think should happen here? There is no possible way to answer that question without 3 guesses and an assumption. Robin Dave says, as long as TK doesn't bring in Hulk Hogan to AEW. 23 Fresh says, why is Sasha having second thoughts? Once again, we talked about that at length on Friday. Spoiler warning. Please do check that out. Wiggly says, yo, 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 yo. Spider-Boss says, Io Sky versus Bianca was good. Kairi getting involved plus Bayley's reaction was cool. John says, anything on the report from Fightful that WWE is interested in bringing back Sarray? To my knowledge, has she not already been announced as signing elsewhere? More to come. Wiggly says, I've noticed Asuka has been a bit quiet on social media and hasn't reacted to Kairi returning yet. Do you suspect they might create a faction? Asuka is not always on social media, and I wouldn't expect her to immediately answer every possible query. Hey Pete, how you doing, mate? 23 Fresh, more on that shortly. So, first piece of news, and it's a big one. It's the one everyone was asking about. It is, in fact, Kairi Sane's return. One more like, by the way, gets us to 40. Kairi Sane returned at WWE Crown Jewel after signing a new contract in the last week or so. There were already plans in place from many, many months previous, including potentially while she was under contract elsewhere, but her contract elsewhere did not preclude her from speaking with other wrestling companies, though there's no actual legal breach in terms there. When it comes to Kairi Sane, this is a work of more than a year in play. And it's a work of confidence for the last 4 months or so that they knew exactly what was coming. I've mentioned Kairi Sane returning. It's not exactly a secret. A lot of different people are reporting on this one. I reported last week, and in fact on Friday, that she was impending and would be arriving very shortly. We of course saw her on Crown Jewel. There was a thank you very much, Wiggly, for renewing your subscription for a 27th month. That is quite a length of time. So Kairi Sane has now returned. She is paired back up with Io Sky, but there's a lot at play here, and there's a lot of teasing happening. WrestleVotes previously reported she'd be teaming back up with some friends. Yes, Asuka's name has been mentioned, and yes, Asuka is likely to team back up with Io Sky and Kairi Sane. I say back up in that the Kabuki Warriors, Kairi Sane and Asuka, will be a thing, in many ways protecting Io Sky. This, however, will cause some turmoil with Damage Control, because Io Sky now has options, and good options at that. She can stay with Damage Control, or of course, she can move on back to Asuka. I keep saying back to, and I know it's wrong. She can team up with Asuka and Kairi Sane and be a very different faction, the nationalistic factions that I've spoken about previously that Triple H doesn't enjoy. A big question here is what then happens to Bayley and Dakota Kai. At the beginning of this year, there was a plan for Bayley to turn face, with Dakota Kai and Io Sky turning on her and being heels. This would then lead towards Bayley versus Io Sky at WrestleMania, one of the big matches, and potentially a big win for the Royal Rumble for Bayley. That is something that's been talked about pretty much every week ever since. It's not guaranteed, certainly things can change, but that is still believed to be a likely WrestleMania match for the Women's Championship of SmackDown. This does mean that Io Sky would be leaving Damage Control and playing heel, whereas Bayley would be playing face. Now, I originally thought this would be the other way around, with Io Sky turning face, Bayley keeping heel with Dakota Kai. How then do you make it so that there is positivity and self-belief and a face turn for Bayley? I would suggest that Dakota Kai might be a major turning point. Kairi Sane is not expected to compete directly for championships. She is going to be more of a character actor at this point in time, though she will be wrestling regularly on SmackDown to break up some of the monotony that we've seen recently in repeated main events. It does mean that certain wrestlers, Bianca Belair for example, will be able to step to one side and continue her work with Charlotte Flair. That said, Charlotte Flair right now is going into the tag team championship scene, so it's hard to say exactly how the women's division of SmackDown lays out. What I will say is that right now they have some tremendous options, and I'm very excited to see where they take us. Kairi Sane has returned, and we'll be seeing plenty more of her in the weeks to come. Blue says everything does feel like it's building to Io versus Bayley. Nice slow burn, and we might finally see the return of the hugger. I doubt we'll see a return of a hugger. WWE, in particular Triple H, don't like going backwards on characters. What I will say is we're likely to see an evolution of the character, melding the two elements to get something very new. Spider-Boss says, who do you see as a real threat to Rhea Ripley's title reign? Becky Lynch. No question. No question. Wiggly says, stupid question, I might be getting senile in my old age. Might be there next week. Happy birthday in advance for next week. But remind me why Kairi left in the first place. So, when it comes to why Kairi left, you're actually talking to the exact right person. June 2020, I reported quite openly what Kairi Sane's next steps would be, why she was leaving the company, and why she was actually staying with the company. She moved into a ambassadorial contract. Football fans over here in the UK will be aware of what that means. An ambassadorial contract, which essentially meant she would be a huge part of the launch of NXT Asia. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit and NXT Asia was never formally launched. What actually happened as to the reasons she left, not only was her contract starting to come close to an end, but she's repeatedly picking up injuries. This, by the way, is the main reason, and I've mentioned this previously, why Kairi Sane and Nia Jax are not on the same brand. Sean, I've just covered that one, I believe. Daniela says, good evening, Tom. Just finished watching a chaotic football game. I'm excited to go back and watch the highlights. Keyshawn gives us a score there, which is a little disappointing. I was hoping to see it, but this is not a no-spoiler show. Spider-Boss says, it's just my theory, but I think Cody Rhodes is using main event Jey Uso to get another match with Roman. If so, he needs to win a championship and win it soon. Yes, Wiggly, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the heads up that he gave. Eddie says, do you have anything more on Julia? What I have is covering the reporting about it. I don't have a definitive answer for you today. Just to be clear on that one. Chris says, good evening, Tom. Good evening, Chris. Thank you for the follow on Instagram, by the way. I'm meaning to get back to it. I'm just not on Instagram very much. I'm going to click the button, don't you worry. Wiggly says, FTR, which is a faction, You saying F the revival? I am not a fan of the nationalistic factions and the whole having them argue in Japanese for cheap laughs so the crowd can keep chanting what. Well, there's a couple of people, certainly, that they could add to the faction to take away the purely Japanese element. I may have mentioned one before. Chris says, if Bayley turns face, do we see the return of the hugger gimmick even if it's just for one night? Nope. WWE, particularly Triple H, does not like going backwards on characters. Wiggly says, Kairi will probably be the catalyst for Io splitting with Bayley and Damage Control. I like that a lot of you are agreeing with me here. Blue says, to be fair, Tom, Io used to team with both Kairi and Asuka pre-WWE. Thank you. Richard, I will be getting to that shortly. It can still happen, but it would be illegal, which is something I'll be covering later. Backward says, what do you think of how AEW has booked Wardlow? I've never seen Wardlow wrestle, and I've watched quite a bit of AEW at this point, so badly. Spider-Boss says, I want to see babyface Bayley. After 4 years, I'm interested in seeing Bayley as a babyface. Robin Dave says, do you think Cody Rhodes wins the Royal Rumble again? No, but probably will. 23 says, did you like Vince Russo's style of writing? No, it was hell. Wiggly says, also Oscar requesting this lag on anyone else's Twitch side. If you're on the Twitch side, please do check in, pardon me, and let me know. Radar says, I really thought Io was the one who would turn face. Really excited to see how this all plays out. Marcel says, what's next for Cena in wrestling? Not much. I'll get to that one shortly. Jack says, Io, Sky and Kairi Sane were part of the 4-woman Asian group called Black Lotus Triad in Lucha Underground. Lucha Underground was a very good time. Thank you, Michael, and thank you to Bayley as well for confirming. Spider-Boss says, I think Dakota could end up joining Io and Kairi, so that takes nationalistic thing from their group. A lot of you agreeing with me. A lot of you agreeing with me. JJ says, hey Tom, do you know who's competing in the Battle Royal to face Rhea? Didn't even know there was a Battle Royal. In the Hot Seat says, hello, it's been a while. Hope all is well. So happy to see Kairi back in the WWE. Welcome back in the Hot Seat. Nice to see you. And Robin Dave says, how would you book Roman back into a babyface? I wouldn't. Next up then, as many people are asking about it, Julia. As we lean into this one, we have 46 likes and 76 people watching. 4 more likes gets us to 50 very early in the show. If you're able to hit like, please do consider doing so. It really does help this channel and the growth of it. One question I need to ask you, and this may be a difficult one, but it's going to be fun. In the battle between Mike Johnson reporting one thing and Dave Meltzer reporting another thing, who are you choosing to believe? Dive in on that one, because this is what the reporting has been so far as regards Julia. There has been talk that, for example, Triple H is very excited by what he's seeing for Julia, but Triple H is not involved in the scouting at this point, so it's interesting hearing that. What I will say is that the scouting department, particularly William Regal, have identified quite a few people, including Kairi Sane, who I've mentioned previously, and of course, talent like Julia. He wants to be bringing her in, and she would be involved in NXT. Hence the idea that Mike Johnson has put forward that she'll be involved in the Performance Center. Now, she is under contract elsewhere until March. However, not all contracts are the same. So Dave Meltzer has suggested that it might be a poor option. It might be something that doesn't happen if she's still under contract until March. But what I will say is that not all contracts are the same. There's a reason Kairi Sane was still able to talk to the WWE while wrestling for another company, that being Stardom, also a Bushiroad company. So it does create some opportunities for different wrestlers. They are not as, how do you phrase it, particular about their talent in Japan. They are open to helping the talent grow rather than necessarily just helping themselves grow. I don't see a single mention of Dave Meltzer in those responses. Not a single mention. Backward says, honestly, the only one who can stop the tribal chief is the big dog. Spider-Boss says, what's next for Drew? Do you think Drew re-signs with WWE? I think a lot depends on Drew's possibility for championships. I've gone over this one to death. Spider-Boss says, one last question before I pause for Robotron Special, aka Pepsi Max. Will you be snapping up an all-in ticket on 1st of December? I was going to. Less likely now. Bayley says, I see Dakota as a real turn on Bayley and becomes a spokesperson for Damage Control while she recuperates. Again, a lot of people agreeing with me. Michael, absolutely right. First one I've seen, Meltzer is usually more accurate with everything non-WWE, which is 100% true. Everything non-WWE, Dave Meltzer is usually far better than most of his contemporaries. Sean says, do you know anything about Gunter not being able to travel outside the USA due to strict residence regulations? Only what's been actively reported, that Gunter is not being able to travel outside the USA due to strict residence regulations. He never really wanted to move to the US anyway because of this stuff exactly. Noob says, do you think Kairi Sane and Io Sky together as a team was all part of Asuka's plan as evidence of her video package at SummerSlam? No. No. Thank you, Jack. Appreciate it. There are no rumours about AEW wanting Hulk Hogan. Wiggly. There are no rumours. Billy says, good evening, Tom. Good evening, Billy. Nice to see you, mate. Richard says, hello, Tom. As all the hints signalled Drew joining Judgment Day. KJ says, BWE said Drew resigns. That's equivalent to the sun being green. More on BWE later. In the hot seat said, is the WWE going to change the entrance stages anytime soon? No. And Angel Lucia says, do you think they promote Randy's return or keep it a surprise? It's out there now. The dirt sheets have got hold of it. In which case, I think it'll still be a surprise. I think there's a lot of people who don't read the dirt sheets, and hopefully they'll still be surprised. It's unfortunate that people couldn't just hold their tongue for a little bit longer. Wargames has been formally announced, and it will be going live at this year's Survivor Series. This was reported by myself, I believe, back in May time, that they were heading towards Wargames. There was no moment at which they weren't planning Wargames. There was no moment at which they were planning brand versus brand. It was always going to be Wargames, so it's nice to see that officially confirmed. I also want to say a huge thank you for the reaction and the reception for the WTF Wrestling video yesterday on Sunday. The Ric Flair in AEW video has done extremely well, and continues to actually pick up more momentum, which is rare in a YouTube video. Usually it starts with a boom and then starts to taper off. Instead, it started with a little spike, then a bigger spike, then a bigger spike, and now it's starting to taper off a day later. Likely now that I'm live with spoiler warning, that'll kill its momentum because YouTube will move towards spoiler warning. But it's been very well received, particularly as regards the likes, which are higher than anything since the Mercedes Money video. And in fact, the comments, an amazing amount of comments, some of which were trollish, and I implore you to check them out. I also really like how many of you are hitting like on each other's comments. Little things like that also really helps. A very lively comment section goes a long way. If you haven't checked out the Ric Flair video yet, please do. It's there's a lot of detail in there, and I lay into the guy a little bit, and I think he deserves it. So please do check it out if you haven't already. Kervin says, what's next for Roman Reigns? A nap. Backwards says, what WWE wrestlers do you think have had the best 2023 so far? I'm looking at Damian Priest. I'm obviously looking at Roman, Seth and the like. Rhea Ripley. Pretty much the obvious ones. Spider-Boss says, New Day versus Judgment Day tonight. Finally, Judgment Day face someone not named Cody Rhodes or Jey Uso. That certainly seems to suggest Drew McIntyre. Brillman, hello Doc. Says, hello Tom, hello everyone in the chat. Dropping in to say hello and wish you all a nice evening here. And you, sir. Very nice to see you. Brad Becker confirms it was May. Thank you kindly. KJ says, I don't care what anyone says. Tom reported the Wargames news first. Far ahead. Appreciate you, KJ. Backwards says, I really hope we get a heel Randy Orton when he returns. It doesn't seem likely at this point in time. It seems more likely right now that we'll see a face Randy Orton because they just need people who can go up against the top level without being the actual top level. KJ says, don't thank us, Tom. Thank Rick like woo. Like Flair said he can pop your rating. Ugh, fair. Spider-Boss says, after watching your video on Mercedes Money, I get why Mercedes doesn't give interviews to wrestling media. That is exactly the reason, yes. Kevin says, Rhea Ripley's entrance on Saturday was badass. I will take your word for it. And Robin Dave says, is there any update on new tag team titles? Nope. There never has been. There's been talk for a long time about splitting them, but then they basically forgot that they existed for a bit, so... They like being able to go back and forth on the different shows and have people turn up who shouldn't necessarily turn up. Triple H is not a fan of the brand split. If anything, he'd kind of like to get rid of it. He's just not being allowed to do so. At Crown Jewel 2 days ago, we saw Solo Sikoa take on and defeat John Cena. Now, this will hopefully do more for Solo Sikoa than it did for Austin Theory. John Cena is not in a position right now where he's actually beating anyone. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's also not necessarily a good thing. One of the problems that we have with John Cena at the moment is that beating him doesn't really mean anything anymore. A victory over John Cena used to be the height of fashion. Rusev had a big moment there. Kevin Owens had a big moment there. Not so much anymore, because he just doesn't pick up wins. So it doesn't do too much for Solo Sikoa, but I can confirm this was specifically requested by John Cena himself. I reported that the match was going to take place a month and a half ago, and it was one of those where as soon as John Cena came back, he presented his list of people he wanted to work with. LA Knight was there, Grayson Waller was there, Austin Theory had already been mentioned and had the feud, and Solo Sikoa was there. John Cena at this point looks likely to continue his time away from wrestling. I do not necessarily believe he'll be there for Wargames, but stranger things have happened. Spider-Boss says Randy Orton on Raw, an RKO for Rhea Ripley is incoming. It is not. KJ says, speaking of Triple H not liking the brand split, wanting it gone but he can't, are the TV networks why they can't end the split? No, it is part of it, but no. Kevin says, I see the men's Wargame match, but I don't know about the women's. So I see you've read the Fightful report. Backwards says, Solo destroyed Cena, went a little too long, in my opinion. Haven't seen it. I have heard that he was an absolute demolition, and I enjoy that. Chris says, I recall a video where a fan asked Mercedes about her departure, mentioned what he was told, and asked her if it was all true. Her response was, if you want the truth, wait until my book comes out. Yeah. She does not like talking to the media. I don't blame her. I think I covered it pretty well in that video. There's plenty of reasons Mercedes Money does not want to deal with the media, and I cannot blame her. She'll do well in Japan. Next up then, Randy Orton. Randall Keefe. Randy Orton is expected at tonight's Monday Night Raw. It is in the build to Survivor Series. He is going to be returning to action soon. To my knowledge, he is now being cleared and is ready for action, though they may not immediately throw him back in at the deep end. This seems the ideal moment. There are rumours that Randy Orton will be taking on Shinsuke Nakamura. The ideal path to that would be tonight, Akira Tozawa taking on Shinsuke Nakamura with the Alpha Academy in play. Now, there are many reasons that I believe this, and there's an element of speculation here, just to be clear. I'm not reporting this, I'm stating what I believe. Randy Orton right now wants to move into a similar role to what Kevin Nash had in the dark end days of WCW, the player coach. He wants to wind down his career, but he still wants to be an in-ring wrestler, and he wants to go for a couple more years yet. So in many ways, he wants to be protected by working in a faction. Triple H has made a number of offers of factions for that. This is one of the reasons that RK Bro even happened, but of course RK Bro is no longer happening, and why I reported that there was an interest in continuing RK Bro after he did return. Now, from what I can tell, Randy Orton is planning a return, planning a big reveal. As I say, he's expected to be at Raw tonight, at least backstage, to discuss the finer details. I expect we're going to see Randy Orton very, very soon, and I do see him going forward as that player coach element. He wants to give back. He wants to work on Raw with talent such as Tommaso Ciampa, working in a feud with DIY. There are a number of people he wants to work with, and I do feel the opportunity is going to go his way sooner rather than later. That said, of the people that Randy Orton wants to work with, Gunther might be worth a mention. I've mentioned it before, and certainly there's a route to a match tonight between Randy Orton and Gunther. I just don't necessarily think it's the match we're going to see. Brillman says, I'm wondering what will happen with the Saudi deal since the overall political tension. I remember we had a big problem after the killing of the journalist back in the day. We did. In fact, that was one of our earliest discussions, and I remember it very fondly. The discussion and the fact that I remember saying to you then, I don't watch Saudi shows. I still don't, and I stand by that. One says, hey Tom, how you doing? Do you think Full Gear will be AEW's last chance to see if Mercedes Money will debut? I believe so. No, because she's not retired yet. Richard says, hello Tom, is Randy healthy enough to be a part of Wargames? Don't know. I wouldn't take that risk, bluntly. Sean says, I think it's possible we get Randy versus Roman at some point. Neither man is retired, so I think that's likely, yes. Hector says, Tom, who would you like to see win tonight's Women's Battle Royals for a chance to face Rhea? I'm honestly not sure who else they can have face Rhea, especially if they have a big match planned for at Mania. The entire reason for the Fatal 5-Way was to basically hide the fact that the plan was Nia Jax versus Rhea Ripley one-on-one. I expect Nia Jax to pick up the win. Spider-Boss says, do you think we could see Roman versus AJ Styles Survivor Series? No. Stranger things have happened, but no. Backwards excited by the idea of Gunther versus Randy Orton. Thank you everyone who's got me to 51 likes already. We have so far peaked at a very, very good number. 81 people watching the show live, and I appreciate all of you. If you've not yet done so, please do consider hitting the subscribe button. You'll get notifications if you hit that bell every time we go live for spoiler warning, so you don't miss a thing. Well, and I'm getting to that shortly, don't you worry. And yeah, I think The Miz is the obvious choice to face Gunter for the IC title, though I wouldn't rule out Ivar. Just going to point out, wouldn't rule out Ivar. Next up then, Logan Paul. I reported previously that Logan Paul was going to be facing Rey Mysterio at Saudi Arabia in Crown Jewel in Saudi Arabia and claiming the United States Championship. At the moment, the main idea seems to be that LA Knight will be winning the championship from him around WrestleMania time. Logan Paul is part-time, he will be popping up every now and then, but he will not in any way be a fighting champion. I expect he will defend the championship on very rare occasions and will be heavily involved when it comes to big shows like Survivor Series, the Royal Rumble, and of course WrestleMania. Logan Paul likely to be in the Royal Rumble once again this year for a couple of memorable spots. LA Knight seems the ideal person to take on Logan Paul, but the main reason that Logan Paul is currently the champion is for blatant marketing and advertising. It is exactly what happened previously with Bad Bunny and the 24/7 championship. Bad Bunny won that championship so he could go on to SNL, for those who don't know, Saturday Night Live, wave, make his musical performance, and hold his championship, and that is exactly what he did. Logan Paul will now go on whatever tours, whatever Impulsive he does, and whatever boxing matches he does, and will be heavily involved, holding that United States Championship as an ambassador for the company. Billy says, how credible would you say Cage Side Seats is? Cage Side Seats, to my knowledge, make no attempt whatsoever to claim that they are reporting exclusive news in any way, shape or form. What Cage Side Seats is very, very clever, because their Rumours of the Day post is one of the most viewed pages in all of wrestling news. Anyone thinking of starting a wrestling website, start with that. Brad says, there's someone with a bad back and neck. I don't want Randy in Wargames for his own back and neck health. Backer says, what happened to the other Viking? Injury. An injury. Spider-Boss says, do you think this babyface turn for The Miz will work? Last time Miz was babyface, WWE screwed it up. Yeah, Shane McMahon screwed it up. KJ says, maybe Ivar versus Gunter on Raw while Miz gets a match at Survivor Series. And no, I didn't get this idea from BWE. I even made a graphic for it before Logan won the title. But Logan versus KO for Survivor Series. Not impossible. I just don't necessarily see it, because I don't think KO is going to be losing that quickly. Just don't see it. Rob, everything is on the table. Or Dave. I'm not sure whether you're Rob or Dave, or Rob and Dave, but everything's definitely on the table. A little bit now on some of the wonderful wrestling media that we've got at the moment, before I'll later talk LA Knight, WTF, and Sarray. BWE, Boozer, the British Wrestling Experience. A wrestling insider who doesn't give you his face, doesn't give you her name, and doesn't give you their Twitter account. It's locked. You had to have already been following it. Wow, how exclusive. You should definitely start following them. They got caught out recently in a big way. They got caught out saying Velveteen Dream was training at the Performance Center for a return. He wasn't. BWE got burned for that. And people are starting to realise what is actually happening with BWE. Now, I've mentioned this previously. Firstly, there is no evidence in any way, shape or form that BWE and Zero News are not the exact same person. There is no evidence of that. None. And when I go into further detail on this, let's talk about what actually happens here. Let's go into like full-on detail about exactly what is going on with BWE. A lot of the news that they report is released on PWInsider Elite, Fightful Select, Wrestling Observer Newsletter, and a lot of it is just joining the dots. They've been caught, and now suddenly they're betting their house on CM Punk meeting with the WWE board. It's not true. Not a word of it. Not a word of it is true. There are so many people who've decided that they know everything about pro wrestling. They don't. There are people who will give you half-baked, half notions and guesses. They'll speculate, call it a report, and then months later when they're proven wrong, they'll say they were speculating. And there are people who delete posts. It's not true. Now, things do change. And here's what's actually happening. There's a reason that they're guessing. There's a reason that they're guessing that Drew McIntyre has signed a new contract. Because if in 3 months Drew McIntyre actually does sign a new deal, WWE can say, we reported that first. It didn't happen. It didn't happen when they said. But hey, if Drew McIntyre signs a new deal with WWE, they can say, yep, we definitely knew, we reported it. CM Punk turns up at Survivor Series. Yep, we definitely knew, we reported it. They're guessing. They're guessing. Much like happened this January for Zero News. A reckoning happened when they said The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin would have a stare down at the Royal Rumble. Do you remember that? I don't, because it didn't happen. Somehow Zero News is still going, and somehow BWE will continue to go as well. In fact, there's a couple more. Reddit user, Squared Circle veteran Kermit125 has resurfaced months after reporting that the WWE was being sold to Saudi Arabia. Which wasn't true. Wasn't true. And yet, they let it die down, and then they appear again and start to lie and start to guess and get really defensive when they're proven wrong. I looked into Reddit user Kermit. What I found was people saying he gets 85% right. You know what I actually found? Hundreds of deleted posts and deleted comments. Whenever something was proved wrong, he didn't say it because it was deleted. Anyone who is so afraid to be wrong that they cover their tracks is not someone that is trustworthy for me. I've been wrong before. All journalists have. All wrestling journalists certainly have. Most wrestling journalists seem more interested in just laying into each other. They're just more interested in picking fights and pretending that they are the wrestlers themselves. I've been wrong before. We all have. You know what happens? You take it on the chin, you say, sorry, I got it wrong. You don't delete. You don't say, I didn't get it wrong. You've not read it right. I didn't get it wrong. They changed it. You don't do that. You say, sorry guys, I got it wrong. Some of the biggest names in wrestling journalism delete their posts, cover their tracks, and post news behind paywalls. And then whenever someone says you've got this wrong, they go on the attack. I know it well because I got blindsided by it with more than 100,000 people posting attacks and a few people posting death threats. That is your wrestling journalism field. And it's not being helped by BWE, by Kermit125, and by the names who came after me. Wiggly says, latest news from WrestleLamia, who do not report news. Says the reason that Io Sky looks Japanese and speaks in Japanese is because she was actually born and raised in Japan. What the hell? Alyssa says, do you see Jey Uso costing Cody Rhodes WrestleMania? No. Wikipedia says, where do you think Raw and NXT will go for the next rights deal? Whoever will pay the most. Michael says, why would the board of directors want to meet with talent? They don't. They utterly do not. It's hysterical, some of the crap that they come out with. Even if in the end CM Punk does return, he ain't meeting no board of directors. Juan says, BWE is just another Stephen Muehlhausen misleading people. He believes Punk is returning. Some people just bet their houses on it. Chris says, by the way, today I clicked a wrestling news video. As soon as I heard House of Wrestling, I left the video. They really made it clear what their sources were. Like, they're at least transparent. Pete says, I met with a board recently. Fell on me whilst painting. Her little. I like that. I certainly believe it, given some of your TikTok videos. Yeah, people put you through shit, mate. Hector says, Tom just wanted to point out I really enjoy your layover from the Ric Flair video that you dropped yesterday. Hector, when you say layover from the Ric Flair video, can I ask what you mean there? I'm not entirely sure what you mean. I'm just not sure. Blue says, is there a WWE board? I thought it was only TKO now. Yep. He ain't going to meet TKO, I'll tell you that. Blue says, I post on Squared Circle. I don't get why people believe Kermit. I'm banned on Squared Circle. Sean Ross Sapp said so. So they banned me. KJ says, Tom, to be fair, we did get an Austin Rock face-off. It was just a SmackDown. And a different Austin. The other Mike says, is Survivor Series the last PLE of the year at this moment in time? Yes. KJ Kermit's comeback was basically, Punk's coming. Funny, isn't it? Wiggly says, the editor of WrestleMania claims that the fact his news is inaccurate isn't his fault. He's renaming the channel to WrestleBlamia. Okay. Spider-Boss says, zero news. Sasha and Naomi will return to WWE. To then they weren't no longer needed. They were backstage and then they ran out of time. They didn't need them. Here's a fun one. I actually really enjoy this game. Let's play a game. What is the most wrong report that you can remember? Like the most aggressively wrong report that you can remember. I always love this. Blue says, Kermit uses the idea that he can't leave his post up to not leave a trail. Right. Michael says, zero news will say, don't blame me, I was given bad information. You posted it. You shared it. You're trying to gain clout from this stuff. Sean says, zero will also say, plans changed. Paratrocopedia, appreciate that. Wiggly says, off-topic question, Tom, but do you ever go to these Comic-Cons for meet and greets of wrestlers? No, if I want to meet wrestlers, meet them. Kervin says, I want to see Wargames 5 women for Raw and 5 women for SmackDown. That seems very unlikely at this point in time. True, Pete, I get you. Robin Dave says, people who believe what they want to hear. Yeah, and this is the thing. If you know what confirmation bias is, confirmation bias, this is a really fun one. Essentially, confirmation bias is, I knew that was true. So someone will say something that you already believe, so you believe them. If I said on a huge platform, Vince McMahon's coming back and he's going to ruin WWE, I'd get thousands of new subscribers. It wouldn't be true, but I'd be confirming what people have decided is true. It's just not how it works. Confirmation bias is called. Chris Leclerc says, Roxanne Perez turns 22 yesterday. Happy birthday to Roxanne Perez. Nearly said you there, Chris. KJ says, since Nick Hausman failed at getting Punk back to WWE, is that why he's gone quiet? He's gone quiet because CM Punk at the moment is not the story. Oh, overlay. Gotcha, Hector. Gotcha. Thank you kindly. The overlay. Gotcha. Blue says, why not bet the house with wrestling media? No one ever punishes them, especially the aggregators. Most of them do, to be fair. He did, KJ. Vanished for a while. Then he came back. Castellar Daniel Garcia. What a name. Says Finn Balor is overshadowed by the members of his group. I think that's intentional. I think Finn Balor is at a later stage of his career and is happy to sit in the background. Wiggly says that The Rock was returning to fight Roman Reigns at every WrestleMania in the last 5 years. Good old Meltzer. Michael says, zero news, saying Kevin Dunn was fired. Yep, didn't happen. Sean says, Saudi is pretty infamous. Yes, it is. Infamous is when you're more than famous. KJ says, zero news before it became zero news. Told me directly that Shane McMahon was going to run Retribution. KJ, what was zero news before it became zero news? I'm interested. Hector says, easy. Meltzer claiming Roman's leukemia wasn't real, essentially. Wiggly wasn't in so many words. I wouldn't go as far as saying that he said it wasn't real, but he questioned Roman's diagnosis. He questioned whether it could be a storyline. Juan says, Stephen Muehlhausen reporting Mercedes Money will debut in AEW and be Paige's mystery partner. Man, that was bad. Stephen Muehlhausen has the unfortunate distinction of reporting 2 things, both of which have been proven completely incorrect. Spider-Boss says, Ryan Satin, stating Mercedes Money, formerly known as Sasha Banks, and Bayley cried on the floor after WrestleMania 35. Chris says, the most wrong wrestling news report I remember, the announcement of hardcore tag team titles coming during the Attitude Era. Eesh. The dude says, not quite a report, but Sportskeeda quote tweeting a fake KO account saying he was going to be on NXT takes the cake for me. Yeah, that's due diligence out the wazoo. Razar says the most wrong news was definitely zero, saying WWE ran out of time for the Sasha and Naomi return on Raw. Blue says Dave Meltzer being sure that Cody would re-sign with AEW, even as he was the one who's reporting on Cody working without a contract. He was the one who started that report. Dylan says, is WrestleMania 40 Roman's last pay-per-view? No. Billy says, it's a shame these journalists are bigger than the honest ones like yourself. Appreciate that, Billy. Unfortunately, some of us have to work our arse off, and some of us can just be handed information share it, and become rich and famous, as it were. Ronnie says, I'll believe Roman versus The Rock when I actually see it. Same. Rob says people are really delusional. KJ says Zero News used to be simple wrestling opinions, which is very telling. Then switched to news, then got banned, and came back as Zero News. Wow. Wiggly says, wasn't Meltzer adamant that MJF would already have been WWE champion by now? Whoops, he's still in AEW. Yeah, but to be fair, that's not necessarily a report. Meltzer sometimes just shares that opinion. Trekopedia says, everyone hit the like button, shout out and subscribe. Thank you, Trekopedia. We have 63 likes right now. 2 more gets us to 65. We still have a little bit of news to cover. We'll be jumping into that very soon. Sean says, the wrong wrestling report I remember was BWE saying Becky Lynch was taking a break after SummerSlam. She didn't. She worked with Tiffany and won the NXT Women's Championship. Ray says, no one has said JD from NY got news wrong. Hopefully, because no one wastes their time watching that shit. Spiderboss says Meltzer and Sean Ross Sapp arguing with each other about the MJF news before Double or Nothing 2022, one which infamously Sean Ross Sapp got wrong. Wiggly says, I think Meltzer is playing us all. He's not a journalist, he's basically a comedian. As I've mentioned before, Meltzer is the most misquoted person in wrestling media. I just want to be very, very clear on that one. Most of what is reported that he's said is actually just him sharing an opinion. Appreciate it, Trekopedia. Was going to read that, but guess I'll have to retract it. Welcome to new subscriber Salvik. LA Knight, his run is far from over. His run is far from over. LA Knight may have lost to Roman Reigns, and his time in the main event scene is going to drop pretty quickly, but there are plans to have him still heavily involved going forwards. He's not going to be abandoned. I can't sit here and say he's going to be in Wargames. He will not be a main focus going forwards, but LA Knight will not be forgotten about. He'll not be pushed to the back like, for example, Cesaro and the like were after losing to Roman Reigns, like in many ways Finn Balor was, at least until joining the Judgment Day, and in many ways as Rey Mysterio was for a time as well. I wouldn't worry about LA Knight. I've been reassured repeatedly he's moving on to bigger and better soon. I don't think he can get bigger and better than Roman, but we are where we are. LA Knight, as I mentioned previously, there is a plan in place right now, though I don't know if it'll go all the way, for him to win the United States Championship from Logan Paul at WrestleMania. I want to briefly talk WTF Wrestling. This is a brand that I created and a show name that I used previously for sort of out there wrestling videos. A large part of it is, for example, the harassment that women were receiving, particularly women's wrestlers, in the wake of what happened to Sonya Deville way back when, in summer of 2020. Now, I'm going to be using that going forwards for my Sunday videos. I'm going to be using the same format that I've now honed, and I feel very happy with the format and the editing. I believe it was Hector who mentioned that the editing should do tightening up a little bit. I've worked to do that, and I'm pretty happy overall with what we've ended up with. It might have been Blue, I'm not sure. I do apologise that I don't remember who individually, but I know someone did say it wasn't particularly well edited and needed to be honed down a little bit. That is now what we're looking at. WTF Wrestling will be the regular show, 6 p.m. UK time every single Sunday. YouTube is starting to recognise that I'm doing these videos and that people are enjoying them. There's a lot of likes in the latest one, a lot of comments in the latest one, and a hell of a lot of views in the latest one about Ric Flair in AEW. Every week we'll be bringing you some sort of WTF Wrestling, breaking down the latest when it comes to the dirt sheets, the true and false reporting, and what it means for wrestling in general. Thank you for embracing WTF Wrestling so wholeheartedly this week, and I'm forever grateful to you. Spider-Boss says, Sean Ross Sapp at this point is an egomaniac. Shit on everyone who fans give him credit for wrestling news that isn't him. KJ says, JD doesn't report news, just talks about what's out there and believes anything that's anti-WWE. Not a dirt sheet, just gives his opinion on wrestling and news. Okay. We've been talking about JD from NY every show for the past 2 weeks, and I'm not happy about it. Next time I see a JD from NY post, I'm probably just going to delete that post and move on. Trekopedia says that person you brought up, moving on. No, KJ, you may not. Jan Volker says, what's next for Becky Lynch since dropping the NXT Women's title at Halloween Havoc a few weeks ago? A return to the main roster. She's likely to be involved in Wargames. Savik says, what I asked was, has Boozer ever been correct about CM Punk to WWE reports? No, because CM Punk has not been to WWE. Blue says, really happy to have the Sunday shows, Tom. I didn't know if we get this one this weekend. Was very happy to see it pop up. I am going to be looking at bringing back the review videos about historical pay-per-views, at least for another run this Wednesday. I want to just continue the work that we've been doing there and just have a couple more series that will help to drive search traffic, YouTube search traffic, to the channel. Bit by bit, we're getting there. You don't need to be sorry. It's absolutely fine. It's just that, you know, this is our channel. And I like what we do here. And that's bad faith stuff. That's a bad faith actor being brought into the channel. And I know that he is a commentator on wrestling, and every now and then he'll be worth discussing. But it's, I don't know. I don't know. Hector says, what insights do you have on Julia? None. Spider-Boss says, when do you see Jade Cargill debuting on Raw? She already has appeared on Raw. Appearing in an actual wrestling ring, I think it'll be a little while yet, but I don't think it'll take too long. Tony says, good evening from America. Thank you very kindly. Good evening to you too. Trekkipedia says, Tom, what's your favourite B-show pay-per-view all time? Mine is Backlash 2000. Great Balls of Fire. I genuinely loved that show. Great Balls of Fire was amazing. Wow, Savik, you've only just joined the channel, you subscribed, and you've become a channel supporter. Thank you very kindly. There are quite a few videos in there. I believe there's 9 members-only videos, which give a lot more detail as to my process here. I'm going to be using that more often. I'm trying to pick a day where I can do a regular members-only video, but I don't want to do it if there's no actual reason to do it, if you get what I mean. So by all means, check those out. When we have enough channel members, we will start doing members-only streams. We will not be doing exclusive news on the pay side and the members-only side. That's not really fair. All of my news will always be free. Michael brings in a quote from Fightful. There is a significant sponsorship involvement plan between AEW and Sega for the upcoming Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega, Paul White and Kota Ibushi tag team match. Interesting. I would definitely expect Kenny Omega to rock the hell out of that. Interesting. Spider-Boss says, I never got why WWE turned into hot potato the Raw Women's title on 2016 because they didn't believe that they had enough people on the roster who could be champions, so they were basically trying to make 2 people make it last. Chris says, I'm biased in my favourite B-show pay-per-view, that's Unforgiven 06, only because I was there live for that show. One last piece of news. Get your questions in before we wrap up, because there's only one piece of news left. Sarray. There was a report from Fightful Select that the WWE were very interested in bringing in Sarray back to the WWE after her run in NXT ultimately did not work out. She has now signed elsewhere, will not be returning to the WWE. So there may have been significant interest, but there was no actual interest from Sarray's side. She wasn't particularly happy with her time there, and ultimately when it comes to the issues that they had, it was mostly that she didn't learn the language to their satisfaction, so there was no real value in bringing her back. To my knowledge, they weren't that interested. Appreciate that, Blue. Spider-Boss says, do you see Timeless Tony Storm winning back the AEW Women's title at Full Gear? No, honestly, no. Thank you, Selvik. Appreciate that. Yes, Ronnie, they did just have the one Great Balls of Fire. There was, in fact, Great Ball of Fire. And that's going to be our show. After the Ric Flair video, we did receive 9 new subscribers today. Trekkipedia, that seems likely. For more on that, zip back to about 20 minutes in. So there were about 9 new subscribers via the Ric Flair video, and plenty of people, new names already in this chat. Thank you to all of you for asking your questions. Tony says, I'm looking forward to the downfall of Damage Control this Friday now that the Sky Pirates are reborn. That was our top story today, about 5 minutes in. If you want more details on that one, by all means, Tony, zip back to 5 minutes in and check that out. In the meantime, though, I will see you all again come Wednesday. There will be shorts in the meantime. We had some very successful shorts earlier on today as well. I've been Tom Colohue. You have been fantastic, and I'll see you all very soon.